Welcome back Numismatics Hub. In 1979, a significant piece of American numismatic history was minted, the USA half-dollar coin. It was more than just a coin, it was a symbol of an era marked by cultural shifts, economic change, and the redefinition of currency itself. In this video, we're going to dive into the rich history behind this iconic coin, explore its design and minting process, and unravel why it has become so highly sought after by collectors and investors alike. And, of course, we will unveil the astounding value of this coin today, a staggering $113,000. So, sit back, relax, and let's journey through time to understand the story of the 1979 USA half-dollar. The story begins in the 1970s, a decade defined by political, social, and economic upheaval in the United States. It was a time when the nation was coming to terms with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and the energy crisis. America was undergoing a transformation, both politically and culturally. Amidst this turbulence, the U.S. Mint was tasked with producing a coin that would carry the weight of history. By 1979, the U.S. Mint was in a bit of a transitional period. The country had been using the same half-dollar design for several decades, the Franklin half-dollar. But with a shift in public sentiment and changing times, it was time for a redesign. Enter the Kennedy half-dollar, which had been introduced in 1964 in honor of the recently assassinated President, John F. Kennedy. The coin's original design, which featured a portrait of Kennedy on the obverse and a symbolic eagle on the reverse, had captured the spirit of the 1960s. But in 1979, it was time to tweak that design. In the late 1970s, President Jimmy Carter was in office, and his administration was keen on revamping many aspects of American society, including currency. The Kennedy half-dollar was reimagined with a few subtle changes. The obverse retained the iconic portrait of President Kennedy, but the reverse was redesigned. The original eagle was replaced with a more dynamic depiction of the heraldic eagle, reflecting the American spirit of the time, strong, proud, and ready for the future. But the story of the 1979 half-dollar doesn't end with just a design change. It was during this time that the U.S. Mint faced an interesting problem. The demand for coins was at an all-time high, but the public wasn't using the half-dollar in everyday transactions. The coin had fallen out of favor in the years following Kennedy's assassination, largely because it was too large for many to carry comfortably in their pockets and wasn't commonly accepted in vending machines. So, while the U.S. Mint continued producing the coin, it became more of a collector's item than a circulating currency. The 1979 half-dollar was minted in several locations across the country, including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint produced its own version of the coin, adding a level of complexity and intrigue to the coin's desirability. Some of these coins were intended for general circulation, while others were specifically made for collectors and proof sets. This created a variety of versions of the 1979 half-dollar, and, as with most coins, some were produced in smaller quantities than others. These variations would later play a crucial role in determining the coin's value and appeal to collectors. The U.S. Mint had also started experimenting with new technologies in the production of coins. For example, the mint began using a process called clad composition. The coin was composed of layers of copper and nickel rather than being struck from a solid silver alloy like earlier coins. While this change was initially made to reduce production costs, it also changed the feel and the weight of the half-dollar, which some collectors noticed. The 1979 half-dollar became known for its distinct, slightly different feel compared to its predecessors, and this small detail added to its unique character. As the years passed, the 1979 half-dollar began to disappear from circulation. However, for those who were paying attention to the world of numismatics, this coin held immense potential. The 1979 half-dollar began to make its mark in the collector community. Coin enthusiasts realized that the various mints had produced coins in different quantities and with subtle differences in design. These variations, paired with the fact that fewer and fewer of these coins were being circulated, made the 1979 half-dollar an appealing target for collectors. The coin was still readily available at face value, but over time, the rarity of certain versions, as well as the unique history behind it, made it an object of desire. So, what makes the 1979 half-dollar so special? The coin's value is largely derived from its scarcity, as well as the variations that were produced. For example, some collectors target the 1979 S-proof half-dollar, which was minted in San Francisco and sold in proof sets. These coins were made specifically for collectors, and they tend to be of higher quality than the coins intended for circulation. In fact, the 1979 S-proof half-dollar is one of the most sought-after versions of the coin. The proof coins are highly polished and have a mirrored finish, making them visually stunning and ideal for display. Another significant factor in the value of the 1979 half-dollar is its connection to history. The coin was minted during a time of great social and political change in the United States. The late 1970s were a period of economic struggle, but also a time of innovation and hope for the future. The half-dollar, with its depiction of President Kennedy, became a symbol of resilience and leadership. For collectors, owning a 1979 half-dollar means holding a piece of history, a reminder of the trials and triumphs of the past. While many collectors focus on the 1979 S-proof coin, there are also versions of the 1979 half-dollar that were minted in Philadelphia and Denver. These coins are more commonly found in circulation, but they can still be valuable, especially if they are in mint condition. Coins that were kept in pristine condition, away from the wear and tear of everyday use, are considered more valuable by collectors. Coins with specific characteristics, such as certain die errors or variations in mint marks, can also increase in value. As time went on, the 1979 half-dollar faded into relative obscurity. It was no longer the primary coin used for transactions, and many of the original coins were melted down or lost to history. But over the years, the 1979 half-dollar began to see a resurgence in popularity. Collectors began to recognize the value of the coin, not only as a piece of history but also as a sound investment. Today, the value of the 1979 half-dollar has skyrocketed, particularly for well-preserved examples and rare versions. Some of these coins can fetch impressive amounts at auction, with the most sought-after coins selling for tens of thousands of dollars. The highest known sale for a 1979 half-dollar. A mind-blowing $113,000. Yes, you read that right, a single 1979 half-dollar, one that was minted more than 40 years ago, could be worth $113,000 today. This incredible value is a testament to the coin's rarity, historical significance, and appeal to collectors. So, what can we learn from the story of the 1979 USA half-dollar? It's a reminder that, in the world of numismatics, history and rarity are powerful forces that can drive a coin's value to extraordinary heights. What may have once been seen as a simple piece of currency, something we carried in our pockets or used in vending machines, can evolve into a rare and highly valuable collector's item over time. The 1979 half-dollar is a shining example of how a coin can transcend its original purpose and become a symbol of an era, a valuable investment, and a piece of American history. If you're lucky enough to own a 1979 USA half-dollar, or if you're a coin collector on the lookout for one, remember that this coin holds not only historical significance but also the potential for financial reward. And for those of you who are just discovering the world of numismatics, the 1979 half-dollar is a great place to start your collection. Who knows, with the right conditions, the coin you hold today could one day be worth a fortune. In conclusion, the 1979 USA half-dollar is more than just a coin. It's a snapshot of a pivotal moment in American history, a symbol of the resilience and determination of the American people, and a prized piece in the world of numismatics. The coin's value has grown over the years, and its connection to the past makes it an item of both sentimental and financial worth. So, the next time you come across a 1979 half-dollar, take a moment to appreciate the history it represents and the legacy it carries. Who knows, you might just be holding on to a small treasure. In the late 1990s, America was buzzing with anticipation. The world had witnessed tremendous changes in technology, culture, and society, but it was also a period of transition for one of the nation's most beloved and enduring symbols, the half-dollar coin. A new design was coming, and little did anyone know that this unassuming coin would go on to be part of one of the most fascinating stories in the history of numismatics. In 1998, a coin was minted that would soon find itself at the center of collectors' dreams and a mystery that would unravel the very fabric of American coinage. It wasn't just any coin, it was the 1998 USA half dollar. To understand its significance, we have to start by looking at its roots. The half dollar, like many of America's coins, had its origins in the founding of the United States itself. From the early days of coinage in the U.S., half dollars were a critical part of the nation's monetary system. The coin has seen various designs throughout history, some simple, some rich in symbolism. But by the time we reached the late 20th century, there was a momentous shift underway in the way Americans interacted with their coins, especially in the world of collectors. Now, imagine the year 1998, the economy was on the rise, technology was advancing at a rapid pace, and the country was heading into a new millennium. This time period was ripe for change, and that's where the 1998 half dollar comes into play. For years, the half dollar had been a coin that had largely fallen out of everyday circulation, with the public favoring smaller denominations like the quarter and the nickel. The U.S. Mint needed to rekindle interest in this iconic coin, to make it relevant once again. But how could they do that? To answer that question, let's delve into the design of the coin. In the 1990s, the U.S. Mint made a bold choice, deciding to update the design of the half dollar, something they hadn't done for decades. But rather than just tweaking the old design, they decided to go with something entirely fresh. The 1998 half dollar featured a new design, one that reflected the changing times, yet still paid tribute to the legacy of the coin. The obverse, or front of the coin, continued the tradition of depicting the familiar face of President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy had been immortalized on the half dollar since 1964, and his presence on the coin was a symbol of hope, progress, and a new American era. But in 1998, something was different. The portrait of Kennedy on the half dollar was more detailed, more refined than before, offering a modern touch to the image. It was a subtle shift, but one that signaled the mint's intention to honor the past while embracing the future. The coin's reverse, on the other hand, had undergone a significant transformation. The design featured the powerful imagery of a Liberty Bell, one of the nation's most iconic symbols. Beneath the bell, the eagle, a representation of strength and freedom, stood tall, holding an olive branch in one talon and a bundle of arrows in the other. These symbols conveyed America's enduring values, while the design itself looked forward to a brighter, united future. So, while the 1998 half dollar might have seemed like just another minting of a familiar coin, it was far more than that. It was a statement, a reflection of the American spirit at the turn of the millennium, a time of optimism, innovation, and reflection on the nation's past. Now, let's talk about the minting process. In 1998, the half dollar was struck primarily at the U.S. Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver. But there was a problem. Despite the beautiful design, the coin simply wasn't finding its way into circulation. People weren't using the half dollar like they used to. As a result, many of these coins were stored in banks or forgotten in drawers, never really circulating the way they were meant to. What does that mean for collectors? In short, it means that many of the 1998 half dollars, especially those in pristine, uncirculated condition, became rare and highly sought after by numismatists. And as with any collectible, rarity drives value. The more a coin is hoarded, kept in perfect condition, and protected from the wear and tear of circulation, the more it becomes valuable over time. This is where the 1998 half dollar starts to develop a mystique. Because so many of these coins were produced and then kept in storage, it wasn't immediately clear how many of them would remain in perfect condition, free from the marks that come from being in the hands of the public. The first clue that the 1998 half dollar had the potential to become something extraordinary came in the form of its rarity. Coin collectors, those sharp-eyed individuals who spend their lives combing through piles of change, began to notice that some of the coins had something special about them. In particular, the coins minted in Philadelphia in 1998 were a bit more unusual. These coins were struck in a unique way, which made them stand out from the rest. As the years passed, their value slowly but steadily climbed. It wasn't until later, when the details of the coin's rarity began to surface, that collectors started to realize the true significance of what they were holding. for a while, the 1998 half-dollar flew under the radar. But slowly, the word began to spread. These coins were becoming highly coveted by collectors looking to complete their sets, by investors searching for rare assets, and by those who simply appreciated the artistry and history embedded in this small piece of metal. As time went on, more and more collectors became aware of the coin's increasing worth. The 1998 half-dollar, once just another coin in circulation, had transformed into something truly special. But it wasn't just the coin's rarity that made it valuable. There were other factors at play, such as the quality of the minting process, the historical context of its production, and the growing demand among collectors. These elements combined to push the coin's value into the stratosphere, and now, here we are in the present day, with the 1998 half-dollar commanding a staggering price of up to $103,000 at auction. Yes, you heard that right, $103,000. To some, this might sound unbelievable. After all, it's just a coin, right? But to numismatists, collectors, and anyone with an eye for history, it's not just a coin. It's a piece of the past, a tangible connection to a pivotal moment in American history, and a symbol of the lasting legacy of the U.S. Mint's efforts to preserve and honor the nation's story. The journey of the 1998 half-dollar from a modest coin to a sought-after treasure is a perfect example of how history and rarity can combine to create something truly valuable. What was once an ordinary coin, forgotten in drawers and stacks of change, has now become one of the most prized and valuable collectibles in the world. In the world of coin collecting, there are always surprises, always hidden gems waiting to be discovered. And the story of the 1998 half-dollar is a testament to the timeless appeal of coinage, the artistry of the U.S. Mint, and the endless fascination that collectors have with unearthing the treasures of the past. So, if you happen to come across a 1998 half-dollar in your spare change or at a coin shop, take a moment to appreciate it. It might just be worth more than you ever imagined. It was 1973, a time of rapid change in the United States and around the world. The Vietnam War had ended, the Watergate scandal was unfolding, and the country was on the brink of massive cultural shifts. Amid this turbulent period in American history, a small yet significant piece of the nation's heritage was quietly circulating through the economy, the 1973 USA half-dollar. At first glance, it might have seemed like just another coin in circulation. But as we'll discover, this seemingly ordinary coin would go on to capture the hearts of collectors and experts alike, ultimately leading to a surprising and impressive value. The story of the 1973 half-dollar is one that connects us to an era of transformation, both politically and culturally, while offering a glimpse into the artistry and craftsmanship of the United States Mint. To fully appreciate this coin's value today, it's important to understand the context in which it was created, the symbolism embedded in its design, and the historical forces that would shape its legacy. Let's start by going back to the early 1970s. The United States was in a state of flux. The country had just emerged from the turmoil of the 1960s, a decade marked by civil rights movements, protests, and social upheaval. But the 1970s represented a time of reckoning, as Americans sought to heal and rebuild in the aftermath of such a tumultuous era. As the U.S. economy struggled with inflation and the looming energy crisis, coins like the 1973 half-dollar were symbols of stability and continuity, a small, reassuring constant in the lives of everyday Americans. However, this half-dollar wasn't the same as the ones that came before it. To understand why, we need to examine the design that graced its face, the design that would come to symbolize a specific moment in American history. For decades, the half-dollar had carried the likeness of President John F. Kennedy. His image had been placed on the coin in 1964 following his tragic assassination, and it became one of the most iconic depictions of a president ever minted. Kennedy's image on the half-dollar was more than just a tribute to a fallen leader, it was a reflection of hope, change, and the promise of a brighter future. But by the time we reached 1973, the country was a far different place. The optimism that had marked the early years of the 1960s had faded, replaced by cynicism, uncertainty, and political unrest. In this shifting landscape, the 1973 half-dollar arrived with a slightly altered, yet familiar design, still featuring President Kennedy on the obverse, or front side of the coin. The engraving of Kennedy's face had become deeply etched into the American psyche, symbolizing both national grief and enduring hope. The subtle yet significant design updates made by the U.S. Mint in 1973 aimed to refresh this familiar image while honoring Kennedy's legacy. Though the changes were subtle, perhaps the texture and detail of Kennedy's profile, those in the know recognized that the coin was now reflective of a more mature era, one that had been shaped by a generation's experience of conflict, hope, and change. On the reverse side, the 1973 half-dollar retained the emblematic design first created in 1964 by the famous U.S. Mint chief engraver Gilroy Roberts. The design featured the presidential seal, with an eagle clutching an olive branch in one talon and a bundle of arrows in the other. This image spoke to the nation's values of peace and strength, values that had become even more resonant as the nation sought to redefine itself in the post-Vietnam era. But while the coin was a reflection of American symbolism and national identity, there was something more to its story, something that would reveal itself years later. In 1973, the United States Mint was still in the process of transitioning from using silver to copper-nickel in its coinage. Silver, once a hallmark of American coinage, was becoming increasingly scarce and expensive. This change was part of the broader shift in the economic landscape of the 1970s, as the U.S. government sought to cope with inflation and rising costs. For coin collectors, this shift in material would later add an additional layer of significance to coins like the 1973 half-dollar. The 1973 coin was minted primarily in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and it was available in both circulating and proof formats. The Philadelphia and Denver mints produced coins for general circulation, while the San Francisco Mint created the highly polished proof coins, which were intended for collectors and enthusiasts. These proof coins were struck multiple times to ensure the finest possible detail, and many collectors would set aside these coins, hoping that their rarity would increase their value over time. But at the time of its release, no one could have predicted that the 1973 half-dollar would soon become something more than just a functional piece of currency. In fact, many people might have simply ignored the coin, its smooth, silver-toned surface easily blending in with the other denominations that circulated alongside it. The years went on, and the 1973 half-dollar, like many coins of its time, found its way into pockets, cash registers, and bank vaults, largely unnoticed. However, as is often the case with collectibles, time has a way of revealing hidden gems. In the world of numismatics, coins that were once viewed as common or even mundane can, over the course of decades, become rare treasures. The key factors that would contribute to the rise in the 1973 half-dollar's value were not immediately obvious. They would take time to unfold, as collectors began to realize just how few coins from this era were preserved in mint condition, while the general public was still focused on the practicality of using coins for daily transactions. A small but passionate group of coin collectors began to take notice of the 1973 half-dollar's potential. It wasn't just the design, or the historical significance of the coin, it was the condition of the coin, its rarity, and its connection to a pivotal moment in American history that made it so appealing. Coin collectors, always on the lookout for rare finds, began to snatch up pristine 1973 half-dollars and store them away, anticipating the day when these coins would appreciate in value. This growing demand, combined with the scarcity of high-quality coins, slowly drove up the value of the 1973 half-dollar. As decades passed, the once ordinary half-dollar became a coveted piece of American numismatic history. It wasn't just about owning a coin anymore, it was about owning a piece of the 1970s, a piece of America's shifting identity, and a piece of the U.S. Mint's craftsmanship. So, here we are today, with the 1973 half-dollar commanding attention once more. After years of obscurity, the 1973 half-dollar has found a place in the hearts of collectors. Some of the finest examples of this coin, especially those minted in San Francisco as proof coins, have seen their values skyrocket. As of today, an exceptional 1973 half-dollar can fetch an astonishing $103,000 at auction. This is the incredible story of the 1973 half-dollar, a coin that represents much more than just metal and design. It's a symbol of an era, a testament to the artistry of the U.S. Mint, and a rare treasure that continues to capture the imagination of collectors worldwide. So, the next time you find yourself with a 1973 half-dollar in your pocket or collection, remember that it could be worth far more than you ever expected. You may just be holding a piece of history, one that has stood the test of time and emerged as a true numismatic treasure.